Paul, you're good to go.
Cool. About how many people do we have here today?
We are live. We have about 15 people watching right now.
Right on. Well, great. That's enough. Hello, everybody. I am Paul Lanzelotti. I'm the founder of the Amerasia Consulting Group. We'd like to think we're a boutique admissions consulting group. But today, we're going to get into how to get into Chicago Booth. So let me pull up the full screen. Okay, so here we go. We're going to cover basically four things. Of course, we'll have the good old Q&A at the end, but we're going to first cover Booth and basically who they're looking for, right? And I guess that's anybody with a heartbeat, but more specifically, what types of students they've liked in the past. Then we're going to go into not necessarily we're going to go into the how to construct your presentation, and I'm going to run through a representative, somewhat generic outline, but one that is useful. And then we're also going to we're not going to get into actually the goals. If you look at the online application for Booth, there is a little section there that asks you for your short and long-term goals. Very straightforward, but we will not get into that unless you guys have specific questions about it towards the end in the Q&A. And then finally, last and not least, is the interviewing. And I'll go over how to answer some of the routine questions, and I imagine you guys will have perhaps a few follow-on questions about that. Anyway, and excuse me, I have a cold, so if I sound a little like an operator, let's say, you'll know why. All right, moving on. Let's see. All right, so what's going on with Chicago Booth? What about the school? So the one thing you want to know about any school really when you start is how do they view themselves? Not only is it who are they looking for, but how do they view themselves? And basically, what do you get for a dollar? What's their value proposition? And the best way to start thinking about that, to be honest with you, is to look at the school's marketing materials. And I know a lot of them may be the same, but once you start digging into them, you'll start to understand what they call it what the brand strategy is. A lot of these schools, of course, hire marketing firms to come up with things like Chicago Booth is a business force. That's their new marketing. And so if you Google Chicago Booth business force, you'll probably be able to find some literature on that. Like for example, Wharton has their knowledge for, and you see it usually as knowledge for action. Well, Chicago Booth is, we are a business force. So what that is, taking a step back here and delving a little more into the University of Chicago, or UChicago, I guess, ethos or kind of philosophy, is that there's this thing called the Chicago approach at the entire University of Chicago, of which Booth is a subset, of course, because it's a business school. And we are a business force, which is Booth's marketing mantra now, is really a regurgitation of the age-old Chicago approach. So that's just one thing you want to know. Now, I suppose some of you are wondering what this Chicago approach is, right? So, or what this business force mantra is. So this is what's on this slide right here. Sorry about the wall of text, but it's my style. So you can see here that they're looking for a certain person. They communicate that through their marketing message, and what they're saying is that, why I'm presenting this to you is because you want to be able to say later in the presentation, without getting ahead of myself too much, is that you are a person who has utilized some of these values or some of these elements of the business force mantra in your life, personally or professionally. And you also want to be able to say that's how you fit into the school, right? So they say, this is how we transform leaders. We are a business force. It has all of these bullet points on the page. And when you look at that and you go to construct your essay or your PowerPoint, you're like, hey, I'm that guy or gal too. Would you know? So who are they looking for? People who fundamentally alter the course of their organizations and sectors, right? Through the power of bigger, better, and more enduring ideas. Okay, check that box. Counter conventional wisdom, we see that a lot in business schools. Okay, crack open seemingly intractable problems. So problems that are unable to be, you know, I guess they're looking for somebody with a big nutcracker, so to speak. So examine data to uncover new facts and reveal new realities, produce ideas, fundamentally shape markets and ideas. All right, and you know, they embrace many perspectives. So this is kind of a lot of the things that a lot of business schools would say, right? But when you're looking at an individual business school, don't care about what other business schools are saying, even if there's a 80% overlap, right? I'd love to see that Venn diagram. But what I would say here is that you need to be able to understand these, internalize these. Okay, am I that guy or gal? Have I, I'm a consultant or I'm a banker, um, or I'm an entrepreneur. Have I been able to introduce things at work? Even if you are an engineer in the back cube with your red stapler, have you been able to introduce new ideas? Now, it doesn't mean curing cancer or bringing running water to every rural, village in the UP, right? What it means is that you are a guy or a gal who is able to push against established norms, SOPs to introduce something. Maybe it's a new way of making copies, whatever it is, right? If you have to run with that, that's your innovation. That's solving an age-old problem at your work. Run with it, right? Um, anyway, and some people will have better experiences in that, but if that's the best you can do, that's the attribute that they're looking for. So what else do we have here at the bottom? Unparalleled intellectual curiosity, honesty, exchange, and rigor. So what I would say here is that that this last point maybe should be the first point. When I talked about the Chicago approach, when I talked about Booth being a business force, if you said, "Hey, Paul, what's like the one thing they're looking for?" Irrespective of other schools, but what is one thing they're looking for? They want people who are, I won't call them nerds or geeks. They want people who have always loved learning. So if you're that type of gal or guy who has always gotten lost in a book, you love going to band camp, or you love going to art camp in the summer, or just making chalk drawings on the sidewalk in front of your house. That's the type of person they like, the kid who loved being in the library, believe it or not. So you'll see that's basically who, the type of person the whole University of Chicago likes. They call it basically, we'll get into that in another slide. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So anyway, like I said before, the Chicago approach, and well, we are a business force. That is just Booth's kind of iteration or regurgitation of the Chicago approach. Life of the mind concept. Life of the mind concept is the philosophy of, and you see that in the middle of the slide here. Life of the mind means exploring the limits of your intellect and imagination, and it means basically people who love learning for the sake of learning, and then it means we're looking for people who are intellectually curious at Chicago Booth. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's very important that you understand that for the University of Chicago, because it has to be reflected throughout your slides. And again, we'll get into that. So I took a look at to gain like they spit out this message a number of different ways, and you can see it reflected in their marketing material. I don't know if everybody's taking screenshots or what right now. If you email me, my email address is at the bottom. I'll zip out a PDF version of all of this. I have a few other materials. I'll give you two on Chicago Booth, but just know that they're looking. Remember on the prior slide when one of the points was we're looking for people to crack open these tough nuts, right? They want, okay, so you have a school like Harvard, right? Case method, case learning. They like that interaction, people butting heads, get some A-type aggressive people in there to hash it out with a case study. That's how we get to the best conclusion. Chicago does use the case method or case learning, but they don't emphasize it as much as Harvard does, right? They don't hang their hat on it. What they do at Booth is certainly they have group learning, but and the classes are very interactive, right? But they want people who are known within their organizations, okay, leaders and managers, who, when crap hits the fan or when there's a problem that no one has ever solved across the industry, they're like, let's call, Jane or Jim or whoever went to Booth, because we know the types of skills that they have in cracking open tough nuts, right? So anyway, and the other thing too is that, and a lot of schools say this, but at Booth, they're not going to be able to give you a model or an Excel spreadsheet to solve all problems in your life, right? So they're trying to teach you the skills to think through these problems. And why I say a lot of schools do that is because, of course, that's what the case method is meant to do at Harvard. But here, through kind of the flexibility of the curriculum, all of these very nuanced classes at Chicago Booth. I mean, they have one required, technically, there's one required class at Chicago Booth that is lead. And after that, you can go, you know, hog wild and pick whatever you want. But they're allowing you again to explore the limits of your imagination. So here in your mind right now, when you're listening to me, hopefully you're connecting, life of the mind with the Chicago approach, with we are a business force, with I can explore the limits of my imagination, and I have ultimate flexibility with the curriculum at Chicago Booth. I can see how that marketing mumbo jumbo translates into the curriculum with the ultimate flexibility. It's like, why does Chicago push this ultimate flexibility? Well, it aligns with this business force, life of the mind, Chicago approach mantra. Okay, so hopefully I close that loop. Sorry, slide's a little bit hard to read. There's nothing like text over an old man's face to get me up in the morning. But basically, the only thing I got a little ahead of myself on that last slide. They're not teaching you what to think, right? This is an elementary school. They're teaching you how to think. And there's good old Milton Friedman. Anyway, all right. So there's I read an interview with one David Booth. They happen, the school happens to be named after him, by the way. But he is the founder of Dimensional Fund Advisors in Santa Monica. And he walks the talk. DFA is known to be a company. I'm going to plug DFA here. It's known to be a company that has returned above average, that has delivered above average returns to investors. How do they do it? Very rigorous analytical approach. Like if you look at that company that David Booth has built, you can very much see it's a product of him, of course, but also it definitely aligns with kind of the cracking open tough problems and delivering, in this case, better financial products and returns to investors. So anyway, so this is what David Booth says Chicago's unique, about what he says. This is a direct quote from him. I put the link down there so you can verify. But basically, it's what I was saying in a few slides earlier. The Chicago approach, or the method that Chicago Booth uses, it's going to have fewer followers, fewer acolytes. They say it's not as cool and glamorous and face to face and toe to toe as the case method, but the Chicago approach, which is the business force, right, has more theory and modeling, more rigorous analysis, and not for everybody. So you'll hear, everybody out there listening, you'll hear that the Chicago Booth School of Business is academically rigorous. It's really tough. I don't know if I can hack it. Like, trust me, you can hack it, right? But do know that when you read that in all of their marketing materials, or you're talking with alumni, let's say, or current students, that's where this is coming from. You want to crack open a tough nut. You have to have those skills and new ways of looking at things. Got to turn over some new rocks. Anyway, moving on. All right, so what do we have here? Okay, so we all know about the type of academic environment and the ethos that drives it at Booth, right? And like I mentioned before, you have to be an intellectually curious person. So I'm starting to narrow down this presentation into who you say you are, for the sake of delivering a succinct 6 to 8 page slideshow for the admissions committee. So anyway, so you have to tell them you've always loved learning and knowing more, exploring the limits of your imagination ever since you were a kid, right? You don't want to be the all-knowing 3-year-old, because that doesn't really exist, but we'll get into that in a slide later. You have to basically establish that you love learning. You've been an intellectually curious person. You love imaginative things. You're following your passion to the ends of the earth. And you have to basically tell them that and establish that credibility early on in the presentation. When I say early on, I'm talking about slide 2 or 1 in the presentation, but also early on in your life, right? So I put a link down here as to why they even have a presentation. So they switched to the presentation format a few years back, right? This is beginning to get old school. Maybe it was like 6, 7 years back, but the old admissions director, Rose Martinelli, basically talks about why they switched to it, right? So anyway, the point at the end of the slide, if you can understand connecting, being intellectually curious, exploring the limits of your imagination, loving to try new things, loving to go to new places, um, that is kind of understanding that is the first step to getting this presentation right. Right. And I am beating you guys over the head with this a little bit, but trust me, if you don't get that, you're going to put together a presentation that is all over the place, and they're going to look at it and they're going to think this person doesn't even get it. Um, I've seen a lot of bad presentations, right? Of course, I didn't work on them. This is a post-mortem analysis. All right. So essay analysis. What image? Wow, what a beautiful slide here. But this year they gave you four kind of images. I could have at least bullet pointed this, right? But they give you six images. Sorry, six images this year. Last year they gave you 10. The year before I think they even gave you more than that. The year before that, you could use any image that you wanted, right? Just give us a picture presentation or even a video. But they gave you six this year, and I'll tell you, you where is it? The six that they gave booth moments. Here we go. I'm gonna wheel this out right here, and then I'm going to hit F11. But here you can see that they, you know, it almost seems random. By the way, what's the assignment? You're supposed to pick a slide, a picture, and you're supposed to tell you why it resonates. Tell them why it resonates with you, right? Now, the one thing that I've noticed with people who do this essay, they tend not to pay attention to what's written here in the sidebar because most of it kind of does seem like gibberish. Like, who cares about some Rothko, Jackson Pollock, Andy Warhol hybrid in the background? You got the lone backpacker here. Um, but it's very important to Google the tags here. Chicago booth moments, why booths. Half the time you won't really find anything meaningful, but the other half you will. And you can use like a reverse Google photo search to see where else these images are posted. I mean, they're all from Instagram, so I'd start at the Chicago booth, Instagram page. But anyway, just letting you know that. So let's see here. Uh, so moving back. All right. So basically, I'll read the slide to you like a bedtime story. But what are the things that you're supposed to be kind of thinking about now when you start your presentation? Okay. First thing you want to say, okay, I am the person that they're looking for. I am intellectually curious. I do have a lot of diverse interests. Okay, so how would that start to formulate into these slides? All right, so think about all the experiences that you've had that involve team collaboration. And I'm talking about undergraduate, graduate, even in high school. Let's say I wouldn't go too much farther before high school, but even at work, right? You're at Deloitte, you're at Accenture, wherever, Bain. Um, think about, they don't need to know about the technical nuances of the project. What they need to know about is how you interacted and what you learned. So if you did a project overseas, if you did a project in some industry you're not familiar with, you can definitely talk about challenging, established norms and going beyond that. And oh, you can see here that if you have any cross-border travel experiences, it's that point right here in the middle. Uh, those are totally relevant as well. Any off the beaten path, like why would he go do that? Does he or she travel alone? That's really weird. That's antisocial. No, it's not. It's exactly what they're looking for. They want to know if you have a quirky, weird habit or even job or responsibility, because they like people who, you know, collect stamps, right? It doesn't have to be the Habitat for Humanity or any of the kind of team-oriented skills. So make sure you uncover those things. It makes you an interesting person. Maybe it makes you slightly nerdy, but it makes you into the person that they want to see. So anyway, so what image should you pick here out of these? I'll tell you, I wrote a. If you guys email me, I'll send you more information on how to think about picking these. But what I will tell you is this: uh, there's several things here. Make it easy on yourself when you pick these either one of these images. You want to, and I'll just pop through these right now as a little sidebar. I don't really like this first image that of the lone backpacker. Um, Booth always has this image. I'm not sure exactly why they insist on putting this backpacker in. I've never recommended any client use it, but Booth used to be known as, like I said, as kind of a nerdy place where people go off in their own little silo and do things. And I would say that they're not really that anymore. They built this new beautiful glass Harper Center. It's in the middle of campus. I mean, Booth actually is kind of the hub of the whole University of Chicago at this point, both geographically, but also because it's probably the most famous and vibrant school there. Um, but I think this is a little old school, right? If if you're trying to talk about certain things, I just don't think a guy with a backpack does it. This next one, the I don't know if this is yoga or ballet or whatever these two ladies are doing, but if we look at what's on the side, we're bouncing. If we look at what's on the side, you can see here that Boothies remain grounded even when standing at 1,300 square feet. Okay, that's great. And you go and you look and you can see here, well, you know what this is really trying to do? This is these young ladies seem very flexible, right? As they do kind of their arm wrestling. But this is supposed to attest to flexible curriculum. Look at that last hashtag, and then it kind of becomes more clear. I think it's a very poor way of demonstrating, the flexible curriculum. But I guess what are the alternatives? But what I would say is this: like, again, the intellectual curiosity aspect is kind of missing. The collaborative aspect is kind of missing from this picture. I mean, okay, two, but I would like to see more. Um, what else is there? Kind of challenging conventional wisdom isn't really there. I mean, maybe if they were doing it outside, and there weren't any windows, okay, yeah, I could see how that's maybe challenging conventional wisdom and safety. But I would say this one is just not. I'd put it on the back burner for now. Um, Same thing with this better together one, right? Booth is a hardcore place, heavy analytics. It's not known for its social entrepreneurship programs. It's not known for its touchy feeliness. I'm not saying it's a uh, not saying it's a very kind of a rigid place, but this whole better together. If you go look this up, right? Booth better together. Look up that hashtag. You'll see that it's basically a big coffee break where they're trying to promote emotional wellness, or let's say smiley faces, uh, perhaps mental health, work-life balance by having people have a coffee break social in the Harper Center. Um, I don't know, I that they're asking a lot from that picture frame right there. It says better together. Anyway, but let's look at this one to the left. This diving picture, right? Looks pretty dangerous, but honestly, this is a good one, right? Well, I'll even zoom in. That's how good this is. So, what do we have going on here? If you start looking at the characteristics that Chicago likes, you have people going beyond the limits of, let's say, their imagination, but the limits perhaps of what they thought they could do, right? You could, because these pictures are open to your interpretation, right? You don't just list off a name of facts. So what do you see here? That's what they want to know. So you take this picture, you make it the first slide of the presentation, and you say on the right or overlay it on the picture and say this picture right here. What I see in this picture is I see a group of classmates and friends, people who will go to the ends of the earth for each other to explore the limits of their imagination and intellect, people who are not afraid of challenging conventional wisdom, which is, you don't want to eat by a bunch of sharks. Now, these are nurse sharks, and it did look like they put a bait pile there in the middle. But what I would say is that you basically are there's so much you can extract that's relevant to Chicago once you understand Chicago. See, if we didn't go through all that stuff in the beginning, folks, you wouldn't have really known how to extract information from this. So, what are challenging conventional norms, conventional wisdom, um, exploring the limits, physical limits, maybe mental limits, but physical limits, and pushing past established, let's say, norms. Um, there's more than one person in here. So you could probably extract something about teamwork. You don't have to be a diver to like this picture. You don't have to like sharks, even though everybody likes sharks. Do you like this picture? It's just those elements, extract them. Those Chicago Booth Business Force elements. Now, I also like this one here, the young lady in the back. I call this one the open notebook, right? You notice there's nothing written on the whiteboard. This doesn't look like there's anything written in her notebook as well. Um, but that's not the point. What do you see here? You see here, class is about to begin, right? The booth experience, let's just say, is about to begin. They're talking about the cases here and things like that, but you can see here that, this intellectualism this exploration of your imagination, new ideas, new, business theories. It all begins in the classroom here, Booth. It all begins, or it all involves the interaction between faculty and students. It all involves people, let's say in the case method here, challenging each other, coming up with better ways of learning and of solving problems together. And so that's why this is another good picture. So I think hopefully it's starting to chime in. Now, I really like this Harper Center picture right here to the left, and what I would or to the right. So what I would say here is that, okay, the Harper Center is pretty much the student union. It's the gathering place, right? And I would say you could make this about anything that you want to make it about. Right? This is kind of like the Swiss Army knife of pictures here. And what do I mean by that? So this event, what's going on here? You could make it about anything. Somebody just won a business plan competition, right? And you can say like, well, this is what I see in this picture. I see people celebrating a business plan competition win, right? Somebody just got their idea funded with some $70,000 business plan prize, and they're going to be accepted into the Pritzker program at Chicago Booth. It's kind of an incubator type thing, and so you can like say that. And if you have an entrepreneurial background or whatever, that you align, you take this and you make it your own. And you say, what do I also see besides that, right? I also see, again, people coming together, people mixing, because obviously some people have suits on and some people have green jackets on, lime green jackets on, bottom right. But what you're saying here is like it's a mix between work and life. It's a mix between the professional and personal, right? It's like, okay, networking, but you're basically leveraging all these things that are uniquely Chicago as defined in the marketing materials for Business Force, which is on uh, an earlier page. And it's important to look up these hashtags that are here. Like, well, what is Raph? I'm going to butcher his name, Raphael Vanoli. Like, who? What? I've never heard of that guy. I actually had to go look that up. Right? I thought I knew everything, but he's a Uruguayan architect, and I'm guessing he's the guy who designed the Harper Center. Who knows? Or else somebody accidentally hit Control V. So that's what we see here. Now, going back to the presentation here, if I can. So what you see here is that's how you start sizing up these images, right? So it's not just like, oh, I write about the Harper Center and networking event. No, it's like extract as much as you can. Frankly, I like the pictures better from last year, but they give you 6. I'll tell you why they went from 10 to 6. My guess, people started really screwing this up and going off the wall because they have no idea what Chicago Booth is about. Um, anyway, so slide 1, like I said, pick a photo, define it, right? So like I said here, and again, folks, if you're not screenshotting this, email me and I'll send you a PDF of this presentation. But it's like, point out the aspects related to learning, your love of learning, intellectual curiosity. Like this is everything that I see. Like the picture that I called the open notebook. You could say like, I see people in this classroom who love learning. I see people who are about to embark on the most important journey they will ever take in their life. I see people who love being in a classroom because they love sharing and exchanging ideas. I see a blank whiteboard or a blank slate where people can choose to, these things aren't predestined or preordained. They can challenge each other to come up with new ways of thinking about traditional business problems or societal problems for that matter. Anyway, I see people who are, I see people who are, I don't know if you could say getting outside of their comfort zone because it did look like it was 72 degrees in there, but you get the idea. Diversity of ideas is another thing that I would definitely pick from that picture. So, and then you want to think and put on the slide at the very bottom, like, this is what I see in this picture. Slide 1, this is what I see in this picture. I extract these 4 or 5 things from it. And these are all things, and of course you have to make it relevant to you. It's a presentation about you, not about a picture. These are all ideas that I have tried to exemplify throughout different periods of my life, which are going to come up next on the next few slides. So you can see here I put down some, and I wouldn't copy this and paste it onto your presentation for God's sake, but you can see here I put down a couple of lines that you could put on your presentation, but to kind of get you in the mood, to warm you up, right? At the bottom, I see learning through rigor, debate, and dialogue, where friends and scholars engage, where passionate learning and intellectual curiosity grow. In my life, no matter the surrounding, I come to know how much learning is a shared endeavor, an environment that challenges me and transforms me. It's basically that's the right idea. I know that for a fact. So, all right, slide 2. It'd be so much nicer if a PowerPoint presentation about pictures actually had pictures on it, right? Some real Twilight Zone stuff. But this is what I would advise, right? And you can do it your own way. Picture of you growing up. Let's see mom and dad. Let's see those cute little pictures of you in a clown outfit. And I know you guys have one, or the one where you're forced to do like the recital, the flute recital. That one's a good one too, right? Hair's perfectly combed. But picture of you growing up. Show a diversity of interests. Travel with family, sports, science fair pics. There you go, nerds. Singing, playing violin. Diversity of interests, right? And you're not trying to say you were a Renaissance man or woman at the age of 7, not at all. What you are trying to say is this third bullet point. I was lucky that my parents forced me to do all this stuff, really. I was lucky that my parents encouraged me to pursue my interests and talents, to get out there, engage classmates and opportunities, and experience a lot of different types of things. Now, maybe your parents were all about, you better study, you better get that 100 or don't come home, boy. Like maybe they were like that, right? I mean, I just channeled my mom there, by the way. But I would tell you this is that you really, all those things that you are forced to do when you're a kid are now going to pay off. So just, you want to say something like this, right? And that's it. And even if you were forced, that's fine because you got to try everything. And hopefully you did to know what you like and what you don't like, but at least it opens your mind up, right? So you can see here, like the seed is being planted by mommy and daddy or mom or dad or whoever, um, that later in life, later in subsequent slides here, you water and make your own and it blossoms into the tree of life. All right, or intellectual curiosity. Another wall of text here. Next slide. Going to undergrad, wherever that may be, MIT to IIT, right? So you can see here in the prior slide, I'm going back in time. You don't you don't necessarily talk about teamwork or if you played football, baseball, cricket, badminton, whatever, you can talk about that. You can talk about kind of first being exposed to teammates and winning and losing. But the most important point when you're younger is learning about hard work, grit, exploring things even though they're hard, challenging yourself even though you don't want to sometimes, getting out there, learning grit and experiencing things, right? You're not trying to come across as the know-it-all, the awesome, I got 100 on every science fair test that I ever took, if there's even such a thing, or that I won the state championship in track. Like they don't need to know that. Remember, keep it on point, resist the urge to brag. If you have a lot of those awards, if you have a lot of those awards, put them on put them on the resume or on the application, but don't dilute the main message that you're trying to make here on a PowerPoint presentation where you're not supposed to have a lot of words. Don't do that. It's like you're the guy at a party. First 5 minutes, you're talking to the guy or the gal. They start talking about their yacht or their Ferrari. Like, don't be that guy or gal. All right, next slide. Moving on. Time passes. So, going to undergrad, learning about yourself and others, and this is where all those characteristics, all those things your parents made you do, this is where it starts to pay off. Now, you don't have to keep doing everything at undergrad, but it's where you translate your love of learning, your intellectual curiosity into more of a shared learning experience, right? Because you're growing up and you're getting around people. And so it's basically like, let's say you went to a school in a different part of the country or even a different country. You want to talk about that, like how I grew up fueled where I went to school, what I chose to study, what I got involved in, the leadership opportunities I took in. And, it's just, and if that's remarkably different than the village you grew up in, right, then that's fine. Say that too. You're the only one to make it out of that village or the state or wherever, right, or township. So here, so when other people are going to local schools, or maybe like I have a lot of clients, I won't name the country, but it's not the U.S. or India, but who everybody seems to go to the same local university. It's a very small country, and so I had a client who went to the States. There you go. There's getting out of your comfort zone. And she, I said that's a very relevant point. Why do you zig when other people zag? So that tells them something. Tells the admissions committee something different. You're willing to push the limits of conventional knowledge. Remember that whole challenging convention, to explore the limits of your imagination. So show them evidence of what was planted earlier is now sprouting because you were watering it. Surrounded by okay. So you can even say like I love, even if you went to like the local community college, right? You can say, well, maybe you can't say as much, but let's say you went to a school that you loved, and one of the things that you can say that you enjoyed here is not only was I able to do all these things at this school, but what I saw, and this is the whole teamwork thing, is that when I was surrounded by the right types of people, hey, other people who loved learning, exploring, challenging each other in a positive way, supporting each other, that's what really fueled my growth and opened my eyes and kind of pushed me even further in a few different directions or one direction if you're a PhD or a master's student or whatever. But it was basically undergraduate was a much more rewarding experience had I never been thrown into the cauldron, the boiling pot, and been challenged in a positive way, to go beyond the limits of what I knew. You went from country mouse to city mouse, let's say. All right, and so picks mix of different activities on campus, perhaps graduation, yada yada yada. So anyway, um, the next slide. All right, professional experiences. Okay, so just really quick, let's say you really only a lot of people will tell me, Paulie, I don't have a lot of pictures from growing up, right? The whole house burned up when I was in 12th grade, so I don't have any. And what I would say is this, like, surely you must have one, but you only need one. You don't need 10 pictures. And I should probably just show you what a slide looks like, but you just need one picture on the slide. I don't need bar graphs. I don't need charts, right? I don't need Deloitte's logo, Bain's logo, Sequoia India's logo. I don't need all that stuff. They need pictures of you. And they don't need pictures of you and like 50,000 of your other friends. You can have a couple of friends. It's nice to have friends in the picture, but it has to be evident who you are without a microscope, right? And they want to see you. Trust me, they want to see you. So you just need one picture for each slide, to be honest with you. Two, maybe four, right? But the whole, uh, you know, you don't want any white space. I'd make the background black, frankly, and I'd put pictures on. It's much easier to view. Plus, it could waste toner, which is always a good thing. So, what I would say is that's kind of what you want. So anyway, so you could have two slides for an undergrad, right? Space out the comments. Don't feel like you have to dog pile everything onto one slide. So let's say the first slide you're talking about you and your homies, and all these sports you did or academic events you did in whatever hostel you were in on whatever campus, and you would talk about that. And then let's say you had some great internship in Korea or Germany, let's say, then then have a next slide. So it's like undergraduate slide A, undergraduate slide B, and in that second slide, just have one picture of you, or maybe two. One picture of you in the lab at whatever, Deutschland University of Science and Technology, and then on the 50% on the right side here, on the other half of the slide, have you out, drinking beer at Oktoberfest. It's as long as you're not hammered or in a state of extreme distress. Like, it's okay to have pictures of you socializing, right? Even imbibing. Just make sure you're not too red. So what I would say is that's how you can break it up. So don't think because I say slide 1, 2, 3, 4 that you only can have one slide at as undergraduate, and same with the professional. And so I don't think you need like 4 slides as an undergraduate or professional, but 2, maybe 3 is good. Anyway, moving on. Excuse me. Professional experiences. So the first slide, I would have you at work. Don't do the logo thing, man. We all know like what whatever logo looks like. That tells them nothing about you other than Google Images. You know how to use it. So have you at work. And here's the thing. Why don't you? Oh, I don't have a picture of me at work. Yeah, you do. It just hasn't been taken yet. So why don't you go and have your buddy, or if you don't have any friends at work, hit the timer on your Samsung smartphone and take a picture of you at your desk. Pull up the nice graphs there, right? Take down solitaire and just have you looking smart at work wherever. And then put points about you at work. Promoted ahead of, okay, you can have a promoted ahead of schedule type thing. You don't want to turn the slide into a resume, but it's like you're pretty much saying, I love where I work because it provides me opportunities to, well, yeah, contribute, but innovate, propose new ideas, engineer a better mousetrap, whatever it is, right? Challenge my abilities. I've had clients who have worked in Afghanistan, right? So you see all these, it's a picture of an American person, obviously different from the locals, the natives, right? It's kind of like a fish out of water. That's a very powerful image for work. But you can have yourself in a white shirt at your desk and put bullet points around it, right? I mean, because if you're a consultant or banker, I mean, like, what are you gonna? I mean, how many in-action pictures do you really have, right? What a picture of you hitting send. So anyway, so you put the points around it. The point is to see you, right? The picture says 1,000 words, um, and you can have it around these points. And these are very brief points, right? These are like highlights. Started this XYZ initiative, first one in the company to do so. Um, re-engineered the mousetrap, learned ABC, taught it to all these different, freshers, noobs, interns, entrepreneurism. I started a new Hispanic employees club, right? When I just say started Hispanic employees resource group when I realized there was a need for mentorship, right? That's all you have to say. Um, and so, frankly, learned about the real world and wearing many hats. When I say real world, it's like not only you're getting shit done at work and doing well and being promoted, okay, all that stuff that you're actually supposed to do, but like you're looking to see how you can improve. Maybe you did some VBA stuff for everybody. So it's all those little things to fill in the gaps that make you such a valuable employee, but allow you to kind of be a contributor, maybe get on work. If you wrote a paper, or if you were part of like the McKinsey Institute, things like that you can have here. And then let's say you have way too many bullet points for one slide here. I'll tell you again, break it into two. Um, yeah, I mean, like if you're that awesome, then, don't hurt anybody, but break it into two slides. So, uh, anyway, so overall, instead of a company or project being the sole focus here, the slide should be more about taking a smart risk and being rewarded for it. Challenges, constant challenge. Even if you're the low man or woe man on the totem pole, it's okay, right? Just see, they don't listen. Obviously, schools are looking for people who have like consummated some huge deal and all that stuff. That's great, right? But don't state things like that if it's just impossible within your role, in the back cube somewhere in the office, right? But just show that within what you could do, you push the limits of that um, as you hit the copy button. Kidding. All right, so I say rinse and repeat if needed. I usually have people who have my clients. About 50% of them will have a second slide here, and what I just call it rinse and repeat, right? So don't barf everything onto one slide. Let's say you have a mentorship program, or let's say like your Deloitte volunteer day or whatever they call it, um, or you do Streetwise Partners, or you mentor some kid who grew up in a slum, whatever, right? Put that on the second slide, right? I teach I teach Goal Seek and Solver or VBA to kids that can't read from the slum, right? And so show because what's the idea? You're trying to take your how you see the world, what you know, and you're pushing that out. So not only are you a smart, motivated, entrepreneurial, um, innovative person, but you're also in this next slide translating what you've learned at work, how you see the world, your skills to other people. So you're handing them this precious gift type thing. And it can be at work, it can be outside of work. But the point is, yeah, making investments in people, right? You're trying to say, obviously, that you're a good team player. If there's ever a team player slide, it's this one. So anyway, moving on. The slide 6 and 7, look at that. So slide 6 is kind of the catch-all, in my opinion, or the subsequent slide is a catch-all. So let's say you just got married, right? I know sometimes weddings in India, let's say, or anywhere else in the world can go for days, right? Um, and so it's like if you just got married, your husband wants a picture of you in there, your wife wants a picture of you. That's fine. You got a dog. You can put stuff like that. If you just hiked through the Himalayas, in some group, right, and you just did that recently, put it in here, right? Because what you're trying to say is maybe you were hiking as a little kid, right? That's great, and you have a picture of that earlier in the presentation. Let's bring it full circle. If you're still playing violin, let's see the picture here. You have, let's say, this is where you could have like 4 pictures or 8 pictures, right? I would just make the slide even, just whatever. So that's just me. But put all those diverse interests in there, family, celebrations, all that. You can definitely just kind of be very personal here. Remember, be in every picture. So, all right, and the last slide, ready to go to booth. You don't have to have this slide, but if you notice, Booth doesn't really have a big old area where you can tell them this is what I want to get involved in, right? But what I would say is that you want to say like I want to go to Booth basically because because Booth, obviously you identified what you see in the picture, but Booth, like I've done well in all these environments that I just showed you on these slides, 2 through 6 or 7 or whatever. And when I look towards the right environment, when I look towards a place where in an environment, a learning environment where I know I can do well, guess what, guys? It is Booth. And I've always done well in those environments. I'll do well in your environment. You don't need to reiterate necessarily because you either made those points clear in the prior slides or you didn't, like too little too late here. So here, you can briefly state that, you know, Booth represents a type of environment I have always done well in. And I plan to make contributions within this environment through these ways, right? And then if you want to put logos, now is the time to put logos. Have a picture of you. Hopefully, if you did take that tour at Booth, you took a picture of yourself in front of the Harper Center, in the Harper Center. But have that there and then have the logos of these different clubs. But just say like, I hope to I want to take I want to help lead the hiking association, right? I want to help lead the PE venture capital club. I want to take up a role with the mentorship program. So all that all that stuff, but don't frame it from like I want to take, right? You could list some classes and stuff like that, whatever, right? You want to frame it from the perspective of this is what I'm going to contribute. And in the same, and you while you're framing it from that perspective, you are telling them what it is that you want to do, and how it is you're going to get involved and how you know the school. Me personally, the worst way to tell a school, unless they directly ask that you want to be a part of their culture or community, is by listing off all these clubs and classes and methodologies. A school like Booth and an essay like this, they're going to say, okay, based on his or her past experiences and how he or she has internalized them on the prior slides, I know at this slide, by the time you get to this last slide, that he or she is a fit, right? I don't need you to lay out there this whole laundry list of classes to show a fit. That just tells me you read the website, not that you're a philosophical fit with our illustrious school. Anyway, okay, so interview, the interview. All right. I mean, this is the deal with the interview. I used to be an interviewer, right, back in the day, not at Booth, but at Anderson. Um, so this is the deal with any interview. When you go to interview, and Booth is invite only, they want to know how much does he or she know about the school. So that's when you can impress them with the laundry list of classes and things like that. If you do bring up a class, I hope to God you read the syllabus. Where am I going to find the syllabus, Paul? Google, right? You know the name of the class. You looked at the curriculum. Read the actual syllabus PDF. You will find it if you Google it. So you can say week 6, yeah, in this class. So you can kind of bullshit, with the interviewer, not bullshit in a bad way, but just kick it back and forth, water cooler type stuff. But they're looking to see, hey, if he or she, the interviewee, knows this much about the school, holy cow, they must really want to come to this school, right? And also you get to make it a conversation that way as well. And so and that's what they fill out in their report. There's a report after the interview, obviously, that they're filling out. And one of the first questions is like, do you think they're going to be a fit? Do you feel like they want to come to the school? Because they know a lot of people applying to Booth, if they get accepted to Wharton or even Columbia, will go to Wharton or Columbia. They know that, right? So the more you know about the school, the more on this presentation you know about the Chicago approach, life of the mind, and of course, we are a business force, the more they're like, damn, this guy or gal really gets it, right? And so you're way ahead of the rest at this point. And so anyway, so you can see here, like, I like the interview. What does it mean? You're going to, even though on the PowerPoint presentation, you don't have to lay out your goals there. You can see how, okay, where am I going to put my goals? You could put your goals on the last slide, sure, right? I wouldn't like lay them out. That's why they had that space on the application. And I would definitely pick clubs or courses or initiatives on slide 7 that get you towards your goals. Like, don't pick the Glee Club or the volleyball club or the hiking club. If you want to be a banker or a consultant, lead with the consulting club, please. But here on this last slide in the interview, they are going to probably ask you a few questions about your goals. So don't think you're getting out of anything. And folks, if and when you get to the interview, use the same goals, for God's sake. You don't really know if they've read your goals or not read your goals, but always ride that horse, your goals. It got you to the gates. Now ride that same horse through the gates. Don't switch it up. I know it sounds like Well, you really have to tell me that, Paul? Yeah, I do. Because people ask questions like that. And people have wanted to change their goals. And it's just like, this isn't a new ball game. Anyway, I digress. So basically got to tell a succinct story, but let's just get into so here's another slide I forgot that I put in here about they want to see a track record of success, right? When they look at your resume and they ask you things, resourcefulness. So if they want you to tell them a leadership story, it's a human interest story, right? It's not like a bleeding heart type story, but they want to know not like that you made a gazillion dollars for your company, even though that'd be nice. They want to know how you interact with people. The worst stories, besides mine, are when you hear somebody tell you a story that doesn't have a complicating factor. They know your job's tough, right? But they want to know, like, tell me about your job's tough. There's an obstacle. How do you overcome that obstacle? What do you have to? So yeah, you can design a better mousetrap to overcome that obstacle, but they want to know about the people. Like if there's a real jerk off at work, or there's your company has a bad reputation or whatever. You have a bad reputation, like, or somebody has an attitude problem. Tell them how you dealt with that. You don't have to tell them everything about the project because it's a 4-year project, but tell them about that, how you overcame that challenge or setback, right? But make it a human interest story, not about how you came up with some, super secret formula to solve the problems of the world. All right. So did this person have a sense of direction, their goals, realistic expectation? Listen, the MBA at any school, even Harvard or Stanford, it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. It's not, Robitussin, right? You can't just rub it on you and it cures whatever. Um, you have to be realistic. And that's by setting realistic goals. You have to make very conservative short-term goals. I don't want to get too far into goals, and then you can have more aspirational long-term goals. But the short-term goal, if you're going to say, I want to go work for McKinsey, you better make sure McKinsey recruits a booth, hopefully for that practice you want to go into. But if you start saying you want to be an entrepreneur, man, you're gonna that scares. I mean, you might not even make it to the interview, to be honest with you, unless you're already an entrepreneur. Because I know somebody's thinking, well, I'm already an entrepreneur. But so if you've done it before, sure, but just be a little careful. All right, and that's what I mean by realistic expectations. So one last slide here on the interview. I would look at the interview questions for all schools, but at any school you're applying to, including Booth, look at the interview questions first. They're pretty vanilla, right? But go through, I'll plug ClearAdmit here. ClearAdmit.com will have the University of Chicago Booth interview questions. Go through a whole litany of them from this year and past years. See what questions they're asking. I'll tell you why, right? Because you know what they care about. If they're asking these questions, you know really what they care about. So if they have an oddball question, um, and here there's really not any oddball questions. These I looked. There's pretty standard questions at Booth, but if they have an oddball question, that tells you something. Either the interviewer was just trying to trip you up, or if you see the oddball question a few times, they're actually concerned about that. Oddball questions are, what other schools are you applying to? Right? Like, why would they want to know that? Because they usually are the backup, right? They have horrible yields, which is they extend an invite and nobody's accepting when it comes time to, ante up. And then, or they'll say like Dartmouth or Tuck, they have a question. Have you ever lived in a rural environment before? Like if you didn't anticipate that question, it would really throw you. Have you ever lived on a farm? Well, why would they ask that? Well, you know that they are off in the woods, like the movie The Shining, right? And you have to tell them that that environment is conducive to learning, right? So if you ever get an oddball question here, when you look at that, like I've never lived in the woods, but I know that that type of environment facilitates close-knit learning and yada, yada. So that's all I'm saying. Be aware, look at those questions. And then for Dartmouth, the Tuck, even though we're talking about Booth, or we should be, like when you write your essays, I should, and you have to pick between one story versus the other. I should probably pick the story where I talked about like building more effective, better teams. Um, anyway, wow, great way to end Booth with Tuck. But here with the interview, these are honestly I didn't really see any standout questions. But look at this: why MBA? Okay, goes why Booth in particular? If you don't have to start off by saying, "Hey, man, life of the mind." You understand what I'm saying? You don't have to start off with that. You would just say, "Listen, everything I've talked to students, alumni, everything that I've read." Um, tells me that it's going to be a good fit. Why? Because this is frankly an environment of people that, okay, not only love challenging each other, not only smart and motivated, but the one thing I could see is that it was pretty apparent to me in a lot of our conversations. These people love like learning, like they love the intellectual challenge of being booth. The rigor of the curriculum or the classes isn't something to be feared or shake in your boots. It's something that they actually embrace and like going after because they like being pushed. I thought that was so cool, right? And when I considered, there's a lot of nice, pretty schools out there, but when I considered what fit best, it was like, hot damn, booth and then so anyway, and then you kind of go into maybe an example, but any courses in mind that you want to take, and like I said, read the syllabus. You don't have to know all courses. How about 3 at least, right? Okay, career goals. Okay, so why booth and career, or why MBA and career goals? I mean, when you're answering a question and they say why MBA, you might as well just go into career goals. Don't stutter stop. Don't say like, okay, wait, I'm not going to talk about career goals. I told you why MBA, but I'm not going to talk about career goals because I know you're going to ask that question later. You'll look like a buffoon, right? So if you're already leading into it, just run with it, man. Make it a conversation. Why MBA? How on earth are you going to tell them why MBA if you don't tell them what your career goals are? I need an MBA in healthcare management because, oh wait, I can't answer that question because you're going to ask me it in 2 minutes. Don't do that. Now a leadership story and a failure story. Okay, leadership story. Whatever. That could be another hour if we're here. Failure story. Pick one that's older. Don't pick one that happened last week, even if it did happen last week. Pick something early at work. Uh, that you were able to recover from. Right. Hopefully you didn't get fired. Even if you got fired, you can tell that story because then you went on, found a new job, and you did things better. But don't have a failure that happened last week, right? Why is somebody who's ready to go to business school failing significant enough to talk about in an interview failing last week? So how would your supervisor describe you? Um, I would just read off whatever you wrote in your recommendation. Kidding. I would look at your old reviews and run with that, right? So anyway, oh, by the way, how would your supervisor describe you? Should be somewhat similar to how your friends or family or colleagues would describe you, right? Um, very proactive, right? Somebody who's very trustworthy, someone who's not only very smart and can do the job done, but looks for places to like raise the bar to better their fellow colleagues, to better their whatever, to make work more enjoyable and solve problems. So anyway, all right, so here we go. Look at that. How about some questions? I'm ready. What do you guys think? Oh wow, a bunch of questions. Hopefully everybody can see or hear me. I'll read the questions out as soon as they get typed into the sidebar here. How do you keep aligning to the booth picture? Oh, that is actually, wow, look at that. That is a very good question. Um, somebody's thinking, okay, so you don't keep going back and saying, so where are these pictures? Hold on, let me fire these pictures up. So let's see here. All right. So the question was like, how do you keep aligning? So that's why it's such a good question. That's why um, you have to say in this picture, this is what I see. Like, let's just go back to this one, the classroom, right? The open notebook. I see a community of learners. I see people who are about to embark on a great journey. I see, so you're not saying I see a woman who's left-handed, whose name could be Brittany because I can only see A and Y, and Samantha. You're like, it's not the picture. It is the fundamental ideas expressed. And so when you say that this is what I see, make it um, little more existential if that's the right word because I'm an engineer. But make it about that, right? I see a community of learners, people challenging themselves, a diversity of ideas, an explosion of like ideas and good things that are about to take place. It's a party. So when you define all those things, then you say at the bottom of the first slide, like, these are elements in my life or beliefs that have taken hold in my life, right? Close-knit collaborative learning. These are things that I've tried to do throughout my life, right? The next slide, where did it all start? Parents pushed me to do a bunch of stuff. Uncle pushed me to do a bunch of stuff, whatever, right? The seed was planted. So you're not going back and saying, remember the left-handed woman? You're not going back and saying that every slide. What you're saying is the ideas. You take those ideas, you forget about this slide. After you take those ideas and you define them on the first page, you take them and you move to the second slide. Now it's all about the ideas. It's no longer about the classroom and the woman, and you're developing those ideas. Where did the love of learning come from, right? Where did the love of learning with people come from? Where did your ability to form and create new ideas to challenge the status quo come from, right? That doesn't come from your little kid. You got to save that on maybe until undergrad or Deloitte, all in good time. But where was the seed planted? That second slide when you're younger, when you're a youngin', show them pictures of you doing all the stuff your parents force you to do. And then at IIT or Princeton or MIT, wherever you're going, then that's when you start developing a love of learning in a community team sense. Then boom, next slide, you employ it, let's say at your summer internship or in your dissertation. And then after that, you employ that again in a new environment, telling the admissions committee that you're not lying to them, like you are the real deal. I employed it at Deloitte or Bain or wherever in this group to solve this problem and become an expert in intellectual property or whatever. And then I also did it in building a stronger team, stronger work-life balance, or personal connections at work. In this other slide about work, and then you're, and that's why, like the second to the last slide, I said throw in a whole bunch of slides of pictures of you, what you do now, right? Your family, you're hiking, you're on vacation, you're whatever, to show like all the you're at an art museum, all these diversity of interests are, you still love learning, you're still that person, so you've proven it to them. You're driving the point home with that one slide where it's kind of, you can have a bunch of pictures, the second to last slide, and that's why you're ready to go to booth, right? And so the whole classroom here with Lefty and the open notebook, that ship's gone. You don't have to worry about that. So hopefully I made that. So you're aligning to the ideas, not the picture. So picture becomes ideas that you see. Those are your ideas that you exemplify through your life. So long picture after slide, after slide one. All right. I think that's clear. Career goals. Do you mention them in your PowerPoint essay? You don't have to. If you mention them briefly on the last slide, right? I mean, according to the format that I think makes the most sense and that I know works, the last slide say, I want to go to Booth first because it is the right learning environment. It resonates with all the things that I find hallowed and valuable. Um, and it's the right place for me to achieve my loftiest aspirations and goals, which are to change the way healthcare is delivered in rural parts of India, right? Something like that. Don't You don't even really have to list out your short-term goal, right? I wouldn't do that. It becomes less philosophical and more like punch the time card, right? I got to check this. So, and you're stating them on the online application anyway in excruciating detail. So just make it high level here, right? How do you? Okay, so career goals. Yeah, I mentioned them at the end. Would you really ignore a C-level person in your company with tons of credential? Would you really ignore? I know schools ask for direct supervisor, and tons of alums told me otherwise, and told me to get the best the best recommender possible. So okay, so you're talking about recommendations, I believe. Um, uh, what I would say is get the best person is a person who knows you the best, who's worked directly with you. One of the first questions. So there's a question about your strengths and a questions about constructive criticism on every recommendation. But even before that, they're going to say, how do you know Billy Bob? What capacity, right? I've known Billy Bob for over 2 years. I worked with him every day. We sit butt cheek to butt cheek in the same cube. Like they have said, if a C-level person is like, I've heard of Billy Bob, I know his dad or his mom, and I've heard really great things. It's like, come on, man, right? Like this person doesn't know shit. Like everybody recognizes the C-level person's name. Maybe they even went to Booth, but they don't know you. See, so that's where it kind of starts to fall apart. And I wouldn't do that unless they actually know your work. So they can say like, I don't directly supervise Billy Bob, but I supervise his boss, and I see Billy Bob once a week or once every 2 weeks, and I've seen him present and all that stuff, and I'm abreast of all of his work because eventually it flows to me. And if he doesn't perform, then I got problems, right? That's hopefully your C-level person can say that. But listen, a bunch of alums told you otherwise. Um, yeah, listen to them, right? So yeah, they have to know you. Otherwise, it looks like total bullshit. So how do you showcase like your second recommender maybe can be the C-level person, but the first recommender has to be your direct supervisor. If you cannot get your current direct supervisor, pick an old current direct supervisor, or pick somebody who's supervised you on a project, even though they're not your direct supervisor. But then you're going to have to explain that in an optional essay as to why you're not getting your current direct supervisor. And it's a whole other ball of wax. So how do you intend to showcase, how do you showcase how much you have interacted with Booth? That's a good question. So at the very last slide is where I would say, because it's not so much, listen, you got to look at it this way. You could don't lead. Don't think the primary purpose of of this presentation is to show them how much you've interacted with Booth. Think about it this way, because anybody can interact with Booth, right? Like you pick the next guy anywhere in the world. If he shows up to Booth 5 times, is he a better candidate than the person who shows up to Booth 4 times? No, right? You're doing that to get to know the school. You're doing that to get to know the information that I just gave you in this presentation. Thank you very much. So you can put that at the end. I would put at the end. Having met with Susie Q, and Rajiv J, like I, I got a glimpse, student insight, first person insight into the Chicago experience and how much it shaped them, you know, and whatever. And then you go into what it is that you want to do. So you could mention it. You'd probably be able to list their names on the application form. You'd probably be able to bring that up in the interview, but just think like the admissions committee needs to know about you and how you think and why you've done the things that you do, so they know if you are the type of person who thinks like a Chicago Booth student. And no matter how many conversations you have with alumni or current students, that doesn't cut it. Anyway, so um, that's it. All right, Indian IT male. Congratulations. What are the common booth? Oh, okay. What are the common booth app pitfalls to look for? Not okay. Number one, not understanding not understanding what the school's all about. Remember how I hammered you guys with like the first 4 or 5 slides about life of the mind, and we are a business force and the Chicago approach. Um, if you don't know that this is a very rigorously intellectual experience, and if you don't know the person type or the stereotype that you're supposed to be, and you can't lay that out through the slides, that's a huge mistake. That is why they've gone from 10 to 6 slides. That is why they stopped telling you just create a PowerPoint presentation. They did that 3 or 4 years ago, because they probably got some wacky stuff. And so this is not a PowerPoint presentation about your life or about anything and everything that you like to do. There is a point here for you to align with the stereotype that they're looking for of what type of booth student they want, of course. So another pitfall, beyond that, well, maybe the primary pitfall is having goals that just the school can't help you with, right? I put that in one of the interview slides. Listen, if you're defining sometimes people do this, your short-term goal, you have to be able to get that, especially if you're an international student. If you're an international student coming to the States, we all know what's going on, right? Give them a backup plan, right? Say that you can return to your current company in India as a backup plan. My primary short-term goal is to join McKinsey's healthcare consulting practice, in the States, where I'll work with a plethora of clients and their challenges, right? As a backup plan, not a competing, short-term goal, as a backup plan. Should shit hit the fan, recognizing the realities of the jobs marketplace, I would accept the open offer I have to return to whatever, BCG in India, right? Where I would assume the duties of a manager and basically, still work in healthcare, right? Either of my short-term goals will lead me to my long-term goal, which is to found my own healthcare consultancy, run a healthcare organization, whatever, in South Asia, India, wherever it is, New Jersey, and help cure the ills of yada, yada, yada. And be careful when you're stating the aspirational nature of your long-term goal. I want to help solve, the lack of healthcare access in remote parts, we'll say in the UP, right, in India or in Michigan. Um, don't get into the Wikipedia approach, which is, did you know in India there are 50 gazillion people who don't have access to clean water and basic health care, you know, whatever, basic medicine, right? No, like they're asking you, not Wikipedia. So you said, say, having worked in the industry, having grown up in an area like that as well, right? I've seen the limited access to the healthcare yet, and that's why I elected to go into healthcare. But that's why this is my long-term goal, right? Don't give them the stats; they don't care about that. Anybody can look that up. So, um, anyway, what is another booth pitfall to look for? I would say those are the two big ones. I mean, what else is there? Yeah, just wacky goals. I mentioned this in presentation. Uh, I mean, honestly, I would say whether you're from India or any international location or not, I always recommend having a backup goal. Um, but it's that much more important for international students, not just the Indian IT males. So uh, I think also common pitfalls to look for. So I know that's a large demographic, the Indian IT male, right? It's should be like a superhero character in a TV show, but what I would say is I you have to differentiate yourself, right? You will differentiate yourself in this application by virtue of you knowing what the Chicago approach is, right? I mean, like show of hands, even though I can't see anybody. How many people knew what the Chicago approach was before they walked in here? Life of the mind. How many people knew that Chicago boosts? I might see a few hands here. How many knew you guys the mantra was a business? We are a business force, not a business school. Yeah. Okay. I can't see anybody, but I'm imagining like one person, right? So the marketing material, even though it's can be kind of bullshitty, it matters because they send a bunch of like mission statement stuff, and everybody should be reading the mission statement on each website, right, to also extract information. But you can see how that ethos drives a lot of what's in the material and how the program sees itself, and ultimately what types of people that they're looking for, and then beyond that, how you should frame yourself in your frame your background and what you should highlight in the presentation. So anyway, can you take this one sooner? Yeah, man. Sorry. I didn't see that part. I should have answered that question first. So joined pretty late. So not sure if this has been covered. Paul, what is your take on round one versus round two? Is the acceptance rate in round two considerably low as compared to round one? No, it's not considerably low compared to round one. Everybody wants to go round one. What I usually see are very prepared people going in round one. In round two, it's a little bit of a more of a motley crew, right? Less prepared, kind of the oh shit crowd, like, oh, I got to do it this year. I didn't realize it was coming up. But so you're competing, I think, against kind of a lesser caliber of person maybe in round two. That being said, like if you wanted a rough rule of thumb, a booth is trying to give out 50% of their seats maybe in round one, or any business school, 50 or 45%. Let me see if I can add up to 100 here. 50% in round one, 45% in round two, and that gives us 5% in round three. Never apply round three, of course, but there's not that much difference. So you have to weigh, how prepared am I? Am I rushing to take the GMAT or the GRE? Do my essays suck? Are they terrible? Am I getting hammered at work? And I just can't do it. So don't rob Paul to pay Peter, as I say. Uh, if you got to go round two because your ducks aren't in a row, go round two, right? Don't. What's the purpose of sending in a shitty app earlier? Like, come on, So anyway, join. Okay, so there's not that much difference between the two rounds, in my opinion, at most schools. For a school that's in, okay, what about early decision? Show of hands. Who wanted to know that? What about early decision at Tuck, or that which is called early action? I think it's also called early action at Duke and at Columbia. Early decision. I know for a fact at Columbia, it's significantly higher. The acceptance rates. You get notified sooner. You may get rejected sooner, but you just go through the whole process sooner. You can, I've had clients who have gotten in weeks before the deadline. Actually, I had a guy who submitted his app way early last year, and they called him for an interview in 3 or 4 days. He interviewed 3 or 4 days after that. They gave him a decision like a week after that. Boom, 2 weeks. He knew, and he got in. So, um, what else for a school that's intellectually driven like Booth? Would a GPA like 3.0, even with a high GMAT, be a deal breaker? Well, I can't see the rest of your application, but it doesn't bode well. But here's the thing. What if you double majored? What if you went to a school that has you have a notoriously high major? What if the 3.0 is actually in the top 10, 20% of your class? Then that's okay. That needs to be explained, I think, in the optional essay. Hopefully your transcript lists your rank or approximate percentile or percentage on the, in the class. But you need to show them that your 3.0 isn't a 3.0, it's actually a 3.5. If you switched majors, I would definitely talk about that as part of your undergraduate experience in the slides. But and I would talk about it this way. So let's say you switched majors and your first major was just shit, right? 2.5, and then later the last 2 years got a 3.5. Put them together, we have a 3.0. I would say when I realized this wasn't for me, you would say like it's kind of I made a mistake. When I believe in my passions and pursuing my passions so much that even when I knew that, like when I tried to make it work for 2 years, but eventually I had to be honest with myself. And this is all part of the growing up process. I called a spade a spade. I went against what my parents said I should do. And I switched from accounting or pre-med into art history. And I pursued that. And I was so much happier. And you don't have to say as reflected by my grades. I mean, I guess you could put that in the PowerPoint presentation, but you would put it in the optional essay, right? Where you can explain whatever it is that you want. Anyway, so is it a deal breaker? No, I'd still apply, right? But give them a story here, other than I was playing too much video games. So, what do you suggest to a candidate with 1 year of work experience at the time of applying? What do you bring to the table? I mean, so if you had a lot of internships as an undergraduate, okay, that can count, right? But you got to think about these slides. How many slides can you do? Is it going to be like a 3-page slide presentation? So you're trying to give them evidence of your intellectual curiosity, of your contributions based on your intellectual curiosity, your ability to team to push the status quo, right? And so last question. So it's like, can you, are you working at an intense job there? Have you been given extraordinary leadership responsibilities, management responsibilities? Have you been promoted in that time? Because you're going to be put on par with people who have 2, 3, 4, 5 years of work experience. Can you compete with those people? So just look around at work. Hopefully you work in a place where there's older people, right? You're not working at a playground. And because that'd be weird. But what I would say is that you want to be able to say, I'm 22 years old, and I mean, you want them to think this guy's 22 years old, or this gal's 22 years old, and he has a title of a 25-year-old. He's been promoted twice already. Like he is a high achiever, and so if they see that you are already at the level, whatever, you have a shot as a 1 year. And also consider that by the time you get there, they know you're going to have 2 years. But yeah, that's what I would say. Really hammer in the presentation, hammer what you got out of your undergraduate work experiences. And I pray to baby Jesus that you have some significant internships, right? Anyway, so okay, so we should start. We have 300. Okay, nice. 35 to 50 people. You can choose to take, not take this. This may be okay. I guess I'm choosing to take it. This may be a bit out of context. Out of curiosity, want to know that is there any negative impact on acceptance rates for international students in business schools? Okay. No. Okay. So the question here, I believe, is has there been any marked change in acceptance rates for international students at top business schools, right? Because of Donald Trump and some of the chicanery that's going on. So I would say it's early indications say yes, that there's a drastic drop off at some schools, lesser schools. I would say like out of the top 25, out of the top 15 in international applications. I would say that to schools like Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, it's still going to be the same. But from the admissions committee point of view, from the career center point of view, um, is it going to be harder for you to get jobs? So Trump, they haven't really made too many significant changes to the H-1B visa program as of a couple of months ago. That's the last time I kind of looked. And I don't know if they are really going to. I think it's a lot more bark than bite because there hasn't really been any significant legislation passed or changes made in these things. And once businesses start chiming up, but I would say that what I see from my perspective is that a lot of international students are choosing not to apply to schools in the United States. And here's a couple of points about that. The first is, do you want to, and this isn't a slam against the EU or any other part of the world, but let's say you're coming from India, right? or China, and you want to go get a job in the EU, you have to really think long and hard. Is it going to be easier for me there than in the United States? Even when the United States having a bad day or a bad week or a bad 4 years, is it going to still be easier or harder in the States, right, with these changes? So dig into that. Look to see, and things are changing right now. I don't know if the percentage of international students, let's say from South Asia, is going to drop off, but I do know fewer, I believe, are electing to apply. A lot of people have this question, and I would say at a lot of these schools, if you want to roll the dice a little bit, right, and I think it's a good bet, I would definitely apply this year because there's the competition. If there's any year where the competition will be depressed because of our friend Donald Trump, it's this year. And by the time you graduate or by the time you get an internship, things will have returned to normal. We might even have a new president, but it's more bark than it's bite, I think, at this point. So don't believe the hype too much. This is an important decision in your life. If you have an MBA from a top school, you're going to be able to get a job anywhere. Like seriously, you go to a top 10 school, you think you're not going to be able to find a job in the United States that pays well? Maybe instead of having four options, you have three or two, but you're going to be able to get it, right? And that's a fact, Jack. So anyway, hopefully that provides you some transparency. I guess that's it. Thanks for staying over, guys. I know it was a long hour and 25 minutes of me blabbing, but email me at, I'll throw up the whatchamacallit right here. Look at this page. You can't miss it. Black and white here. MBA at AmerasiaConsulting.com. Reference the name of the this Chicago booth GMAT Club presentation in the title of the email, so I know to hit delete before even opening it. No, so I know that to go look and what you guys want. I'll email you this presentation. I'll email you some other information about Chicago booth that I put together. And away we go. And that's it. So I think that's it. I think they're about to yank me off stage. So there you go. MBA at AmerasiaConsulting.com. And I'll talk to everybody later. Bye.